"I'm the one who built Amarin Pickers the Furious," Mike Wolfe yelled as he heard the life sentence being given. The shout broke the silence in the courtroom. He saw the man who used to be on TV shows across the country looking for valuable treasures in a new, unexpectedly dark chapter in his life. Mike Wolfe, the star of American Pickers, was found guilty of killing his ex-partner Frank Fritz. Just before the prison door closed behind him, he could only say goodbye in a shocking way. Goodbye forever. A shocking report from America has left millions of viewers in shock. People were shocked when Mike Wolfe, the famous star of the show American Pickers, was suddenly led away in handcuffs. At first, many people thought that Wolfe's arrest was only related to ongoing business disputes with the History Channel or to disagreements in the antiques community. However, the shocking truth has come out. Wolfe was arrested for the death of his ex-partner Frank Fritz, and the cause was not as simple as was first suggested. Mike Wolfe, who played Frank on American Pickers, also posted a sad message on Instagram about the actor's death. He said, "I'm heartbroken to hear of Frank's passing. I've known Frank for over half of my life, and what you saw on TV was just how it was off camera. He was a one-of-a-kind guy, and rest in peace, buddy." These words, which sound sincere and full of regret, take on a sinister and chilling tone when compared to the horrifying truth that Wolfe is accused of killing Fritz. Behind the veil of people who read those lines can't help but shudder at the thought of the person who wrote them possibly hiding a dark secret and a horrible crime behind flowery words about friendship and loss. Did the accused feel even a glimmer of regret in his heart? At first, investigators said that Fritz's death was caused by a late sequel of cerebral infarction, which means that he had long-lasting complications from the stroke he had. His medical records also showed that he had cerebrovascular disease, and aortic stenosis is a long-term condition that can make it hard for blood to flow through the body. However, after more investigation, the truth came out when an empty pill bottle was found in Fritz's home. It had a very faint fingerprint of Wolfe's on it, which investigators painstakingly analyzed and matched with DNA to reveal the truth. Instead of a natural death, investigators now believe Fritz was the victim of a planned murder, and the subsequent medical report shockingly showed that there was a lethal level. There was an undeniable truth that Fritz had been given an overdose on purpose, and the main suspect was none other than Mike Wolfe. Prosecutors believe this wasn't an accident, but rather a carefully planned act of slipping medication into the drink of his ex-partner, who used to trust him completely. Some people have even called this act the devil in disguise. But many fans still think that the tensions between the two pickers were just a way to boost the show's ratings. Wolfe was arrested and faced serious murder charges. Prosecutors called it an act of revenge, motivated by unquenchable jealousy and greed. According to another report, Wolfe was arrested after a member of the American Pickers crew led the instigators to Fritz's home, where he was found dead. The Iowa State Police did a thorough investigation and found enough evidence to file a murder charge, including Wolfe's fingerprints on the pill bottle and suspicious text messages sent to Fritz. First-degree murder charge. The investigation into Frank Fritz's death really took a turn for the worse when the medical examiner found strange signs and clear contradictions in the toxicology report. At first, the official cause of death was said to be complications from the stroke Fritz had previously suffered, but the detailed autopsy results showed the horrifying truth. The levels of prescription drugs found in his body were many times higher than the dosage prescribed by his doctor. Investigators were immediately suspicious of this difference, especially since Fritz was still recovering and strictly following his medication schedule while being closely watched by medical professionals. The drug found in dangerously high amounts in Frank Fritz's body was later identified as fentanyl, a strong opioid pain reliever. Fentanyl is known for being very strong, and even a small overdose can quickly kill. The discovery of fentanyl in Fritz's body raised a lot of questions. Medication wasn't on the list of drugs his doctor prescribed for his health condition, after having a stroke. Given his medical history and strictly controlled medication regimen, the chance of Frank Fritz voluntarily taking a large amount of fentanyl to the point of causing death was very low, almost impossible. He was in recovery and being closely watched by family and medical staff, so using a strong pain reliever without a prescription would have been illogical and against his health condition and treatment plan. In that situation, investigators looked at people who had been close to Frank Fritz in the last few hours of his life. One name, Mike Wolfe, came up as a leading possible suspect. According to information that had already been made public, Wolfe often went to Fritz's house, which made it easy for him to give Fritz fentanyl without anyone noticing. Interestingly, the discovery of fentanyl in Fritz's body coincided suspiciously with evidence presented at trial about Wolfe's internet search. During Wolfe's trial, prosecutors showed that he had looked for information on poisons that couldn't be detected and ways to fake a death that looked like a stroke. This coincidence made it even more likely that Wolfe had planned his crime ahead of time and used fentanyl as a tool. All of these things, Fritz's lethal level of fentanyl in his body, along with Wolfe's access and the evidence of his searches for information, made it more likely that Wolfe had planned his crime. The autopsy reports important findings about poisons and fake deaths, made it clear that Frank Fritz had been poisoned on purpose, not by accident. These findings led the Iowa State Police to shift their investigation into a murder case, with Mike Wolfe as the main suspect. The Iowa police secretly began an investigation focusing on those who had been in contact with Frank Fritz during his last hours, including Wolfe. What they found shocked everyone, even the most experienced detectives. Detectives from the $1 Million Will and the killer's tragic security footage from Frank Fritz's quiet neighborhood accidentally caught an important detail. Mike Wolfe's car was seen at Fritz's house late at night, about 3 hours before the 911 call. It was dark outside, and everyone was fast asleep, but the sight of Wolfe's car raised suspicions, especially since he was having a rough time with Fritz at the time. By dawn, it was clear that Wolfe was the one who did it. Wolfe himself called 911, his voice sounding frantic as he said he had gone to check on his old friend Fritz and found him unconscious and not responding. At first glance, the call seemed sincere, but when investigators looked more closely, they took on a different tone. Could this have been a planned move to set up a perfect alibi and control the story from the start? When paramedics and police arrived at the scene, Wolfe seemed upset, and there were even reports that he was crying. This outward display of sadness could have been planned to reinforce the innocent image Wolfe was trying to create. He wanted everyone to think he was just a worried friend who happened upon a tragic event. However, this grief was very different from Wolfe's strange behavior right after Frank Fritz was pronounced dead. Not stopping there, Mike Wolfe seemed to use all the information he had about Fritz's health to set up the perfect crime scene, hiding his true intentions. Wolfe, Fritz's longtime companion, must have known a lot about his medical history, including the previous stroke and heart problems. He probably planned to use fentanyl, a very strong opioid, knowing that its effects could be mistaken for or make stroke symptoms worse. Wolfe carefully set up the scene to support the idea that Fritz died naturally from complications from the stroke. He made sure that Fritz was found in a natural resting position, removing any obvious signs of foul play. After spending time grieving the death of his longtime friend Fritz, Wolfe quickly tried to take control of Fritz's valuable antique collection and the intellectual property related to the American Pickers show. Within 48 hours of Fritz's death, Wolfe called his lawyer and said he wanted to buy the rights to use Fritz's name and image in future commercial products. He didn't hesitate to go to Fritz's secret storage locations where rare and valuable antiques were kept that had never been seen before. When details of Frank Fritz's will were shown on TV, the dispute over his will became even more complicated and serious. According to William Fritz, Frank's biological father, who filed a lawsuit to validate the will, his son's huge fortune, worth an estimated $6 million, was left to Mike Wolfe, a former close co-star. This information caused anger and suspicion in the family, and among people who looked up to Frank Fritz as Frank's biological father and the last living relative. Fritz probably thought it was strange and suspicious that his son would leave everything to a friend, especially since Frank's health was getting worse before he died. He had every right to question the will's honesty and voluntariness, especially after hearing about Wolfe's shady actions and financial motivations during the murder trial. When Mike Wolfe heard about William Fritz's lawsuit, he quickly called his own lawyer to protect Frank Fritz's last wishes. But this only made things worse. There were more questions about Wolfe's true intentions. Was he really trying to protect his late friend's wishes, or was he just trying to protect the huge fortune he was about to inherit? This could have been the result of smart and planned behavior. The main issue in the lawsuit was whether Frank Fritz had the mental capacity to understand and sign the will at the time. If the will was upheld, Mike Wolfe would automatically become the owner of a multimillion-dollar estate, which would fuel his greed and exploitation even more. During the murder trial, prosecutors said that William Fritz was fighting to protect his son's legacy. He may have thought that Frank would never have meant to leave everything to Wolfe, especially since there was tension between them in Fritz's last years. Wolfe's hasty and calculated actions pointed to a deeper motive that fit with the theory that he thought Fritz no longer deserved the fruits of their shared success. Evidence from Wolfe's journal also showed frustration, and to get all the attention and power, Wolfe planned to kill Fritz, so his late-night visit to Fritz's house, his 911 call, and his act of grief could have all been part of a complicated plan to create a perfect alibi. However, the autopsy report's contradictory details, Wolfe's sketchy search history, and the angry entries in his journal slowly peeled back the layers of his mask, revealing his whole plot and bringing him face with justice right after Fritz's death. After a thorough search of Mike Wolfe's home and office, detectives found a hidden safe containing unmarked prescription pill bottles. The drugs found inside were the same toxic substance that was found in Fritz's body, which sent chills down everyone's spine. But what shocked and outraged the public even more were the writings found in Mike Wolfe's journal, a personal document that showed the dark abyss in his soul. These journal pages didn't just recount minor events. Despite their disagreements, they had a growing anger and hatred toward Frank Fritz that got stronger over time. This hatred reached its peak in a journal entry written just a few weeks before Fritz's death. In it, Wolfe wrote, "He thinks he can come back and take half the attention again. He forgets that without me, there would be no show. He's become a burden. Now, I see there's only one way to salvage what I've built." These words didn't just show irritation or jealousy between coworkers. They showed Wolfe's extreme selfishness and obsession with power and attention to the point where he saw Fritz as an impediment to his success. Calling Fritz a burden robbed him of all his dignity and made him seem like something that didn't need to be there and should be taken away. The phrase, "now I see there's only one way to salvage what I've built," had a dark and ominous meaning. It suggested that Wolfe had thought about a final solution if Fritz was permanently removed from Wolfe's life and the show. When Wolfe was later found guilty of murder, these words became even more chilling and terrifying, showing a coldly calculated intent to kill something that had been planned. These journal entries showed a completely different side of Mike Wolfe, one that was very different from the charming and loving persona he had created on TV. Mike Wolfe gets a life sentence in court. His Trial lasted 6 tense weeks. Drawing intense, the prosecution built a strong case against Wolfe based on a number of pieces of unarguable evidence that showed he was guilty. One of the most important pieces of evidence was the medical examiner's report, which identified the lethal dose of fentanyl found in Frank Fritz's body. This was a drug that Fritz had not been prescribed, and it went against the initial report that he died of complications from a stroke. Wolfe's internet search history also showed that he had researched poisons that are hard to detect and how to make them. Prosecution also showed that unmarked fentanyl bottles were found in a hidden safe at Wolfe's home and office. But the most damning evidence was Wolfe's angry journal, in which he vented his anger and wanted Fritz to disappear, revealing his motive for murder. Also, security footage showing Wolfe's car arriving at Fritz's house late at night, just hours before the emergency call was made, cast serious doubt on Wolfe's testimony and his strange behavior after Fritz's death. The prosecution's case focused a lot on Swift's attempts to take his late friend's property and intellectual property. Wolfe's internet search history showed even more disturbing questions, like can drug interactions for strokes be found after death, and how to make someone's death look like a stroke complication. The prosecution strongly believed that Wolfe had heartlessly used Fritz's previous health problems as an excuse to hide his horrible crime. Members of the audience talked about how Wolfe and Fritz's relationship had changed in alarming ways in the years before Fritz's death. For example, a production assistant said she had heard Wolfe and Fritz arguing about the show's future direction, with Wolfe demanding full creative control. The assistant also said she had heard Wolfe tell Fritz that he had lost his equal pay because of his health problems. These accounts painted a picture of a broken relationship marked by other witnesses, said Wolfe was becoming more authoritarian and controlling, often saying bad things about Fritz to network executives and purposely isolating him from longtime friends in the antiques community. Danielle Kabai's emotional testimony may have been the most powerful. She reluctantly testified for the prosecution with a shaking voice, and she remembered confronting Wolfe about his behavior toward Fritz. I noticed Mike had become obsessed with being the sole face of American Pickers. She said when I asked him about making, he got defensive and angry and told me not to get involved in things that weren't my business. KB also said she had found disturbing notes in Wolfe's office about Fritz's medication schedule. When she confronted him about it, he just said he was worried about Frank's health. In his defense, Mike Wolfe's lawyers tried to show him as a good friend who had really tried to make things right with Frank Fritz before he died. They used testimony from network executive support for Fritz's recovery, but this theory was shattered by testimony from Fritz's personal doctor. The doctor confirmed that Fritz had been worried about his health, but he remained optimistic about his recovery and even planned to start his own antiques business. More importantly, the doctor said that he had never prescribed the drugs found in Fritz's body in such a lethal dose. This testimony was a death blow to Wolfe's defense and ruled out any other possibilities. During cross-examination, Mike Wolfe's calm demeanor started to break when the prosecutor directly asked him if he had spiked Fritz's drink with poison. He lost it and yelled at the prosecutor, "You don't understand what it's like to build something from nothing while watching someone else easily reap the benefits, while everyone thinks he's just as important as I am to the show's success." This outburst forced his defense to step up, but the damage had already been done. Later, the jury said that this moment was the turning point in their deliberations because it showed how angry Wolfe had been for years since Fritz left the show. Wolfe's financial motives became more clear as forensic accountants testified about changes they saw in his business structure just months before Fritz's death. Wolfe had quietly restructured his companies to gain control over Fritz's intellectual property. In the event of Fritz's incapacity or death, he had also bought a $5 million business insurance policy that named his company as the beneficiary. Prosecutors also said that Wolfe had set up several fake companies that Fritz had no knowledge of, and had secretly moved valuable antiques worth over $2 million into these companies. The jury only deliberated for 4 hours before finding Wolfe guilty. The judge then announced the life sentence. Sentence with no chance of parole. Things seemed to get completely out of hand. Wolfe, who had been amazingly calm during the trial, jumped to his feet and screamed, "You don't understand. He will destroy everything. He will ruin my legacy." He slammed papers and cups of water off the defense table as he ran across it, and police officers rushed toward him right away, but he managed to lunge at the Fritz family, flailing his arms before being restrained. Screams and chaos broke out in the courtroom as Wolfe did it again. When he fought back, he grabbed an old walking stick that had been brought in as evidence and swung it like a weapon, hitting one of the court officers in the shoulder. "I built American Pickers, that was my life's work," he yelled as 3 officers tackled him to the ground. The judge had to leave the courtroom as Wolfe continued to thrash violently, kicking and shouting about betrayal while officers tried to restrain him. Fritz's sister had to be led out of the trial by security as Wolfe tried to escape. "Shout at her, I deserve it all. This is my show," he hissed as he was finally handcuffed. Perhaps the most shocking moment happened when Wolfe looked directly into the eyes of Danielle Colby, who was sitting in the audience, and yelled, "Tell them the truth. Tell them what Frank was really like." Kabue turned her face away in pain, and other crew members couldn't hold back tears. Documents shown in court showed that Wolfe had intentionally kept crew members away from Fritz in the years leading up to his death, creating a deep rift in the relationship between the two. While security guards tried to calm Wolfe down, he kept making crazy comments that revealed even more shocking information. He was going to start his own show, he screamed. "He told me I was out of date, and the network wanted him back." The judge's last words, which echoed through the courtroom before Wolfe's outburst, seemed to hint at a sad ending. "Mr. Wolfe," he said in a stern voice, "you painted yourself as a protector of American history and culture. But deep down you plan to kill and get revenge on the man who helped build that foundation while using your fame to preach about the values of the past. Today, justice has been done with this final life sentence. Not only for Frank Fritz, but also for the millions of viewers who put their trust in you right after that fateful moment." Mike Wolfe, who could no longer keep up his calm exterior, charged across the defense table in an uncontrollable rage, marking his last public appearance before being taken away. The rest of his life in prison, and as the cold prison door slammed shut behind him, his last words in court will forever haunt all of you. Was that a desperate cry from a man facing the well-deserved sentence, or was it just the last act in a shameless, manipulative performance by a master con artist? The answer is still a mystery. Mike Wolfe, 60, and Frank Fritz used to co-host the popular reality TV show American Pickers. People all over the world became familiar with these two men as they traveled across America, looking for rare antiques in old bookstores and remote neighborhoods. Their on-screen relationship was based on cooperation, a shared love of vintage treasures, and a little playful teasing. They seemed to be an inseparable pair, each with their own unique knowledge and experience that gives the show a special charm. Fans love the natural interactions and as an important part of American Pickers. They had small disagreements from time to time, but over time, their relationship started to fall apart behind the happy footage and interesting haggling scenes. The tension between Wolfe and Fritz became more obvious, even though they had been friends for years. Their relationship was under a lot of stress in recent years, especially after Fritz stopped appearing on American Pickers after season 21. The main reasons for this rift were Fritz's health problems and different work ethics. He had serious health problems, like back and heart problems, that made it hard for him to stay on the show. Tensions between Wolfe and Fritz also grew because Wolfe seemed to want more control over the direction of the show. He often complained about Fritz to network executives, trying to separate himself from his co-host after Fritz left American Pickers. Fritz said he felt left out of the show and unfairly treated. These problems probably played a big role in Wolfe's decision to take drastic action against Fritz. The Mike Wolfe case caused an American Pickers, a reality TV show that used to have millions of viewers around the world, had an uncertain future. History Channel quickly took down all episodes featuring Wolfe and released a statement expressing shock and condolences to the Fritz family. Many major sponsors also pulled their support, leaving the future of the show in the dark. Frank Fritz's family went to court to get control over his antique collection and intellectual property, while suing History Channel for allowing Wolfe's increasingly unstable behavior. Wolfe's family and friends said they would honor his legacy. Mental health professionals looked at the case and said Mike Wolfe may have had narcissistic personality disorder, a condition that could have gotten worse after years of living in the spotlight. Dr. Robert Keller, a forensic psychologist who closely watched the trial, said this doesn't excuse his actions but helps us understand the difference. Narcissistic people can seem calm and charismatic on the outside, but on the inside they hold deep resentment and a desire for revenge. Fritz's departure from the show probably caused a deep narcissistic injury that lasted for years. What was most disturbing was how Mike Wolfe used his fame as a TV personality to change public opinion. In the weeks after Fritz's death, he went on social media pretending to mourn and apologize for his actions. He blamed the death on complications from a stroke among his old friends while shamelessly using the occasion to promote special items in Fritz's honor. "This isn't just a murder," prosecutor Sarah Donovan said passionately in her closing arguments. "It's a calculated deception of millions of trusting viewers who grieved for a man that the defendant murdered and then cruelly exploited their grief to profit himself." Investigators found that over $1 million had been raised in the weeks after Fritz's death, with most of it going to a charity, of the money going into accounts that only Wolfe could access. As Mike Wolfe starts his life behind bars, the fans and viewers who once supported him are left with mixed feelings. They are trying to figure out how to reconcile the public image of a passionate antiques collector with the reality of a man who can murder and cause violence right in the courtroom. "We feel betrayed," as Robert Jenkins, a middle-aged American who had been a longtime fan of the show, said. "We invited him into our homes every week. We trusted his simple charm. It's horrible that all of Wolfe's TV appearances and support for preserving history were for nothing." Other celebrities who had worked with him also spoke out against him, expressing shock and asking people to honor Frank Fritz's memory. For the American Picker crew, the tragedy continues. Their testimonies in court showed a deep split within the team, with some still believing Wolfe was innocent and others being sure he was guilty. Danielle Kebuai, who she put her TV career on hold because she needed to heal and reflect. In a short statement, she asked for privacy and said she hoped that the legacy of preserving antiques that had brought everyone together in the first place could continue in some way, even though these terrible events had happened. Wolfe was given a life sentence, but both Wolfe and Fritz's legacies will live on, though in very different ways. Fritz's legacy will live on in the form of the show American Pickers left behind. He was a humble collector who knew a lot about unique antiques and had a down-to-earth, funny personality. He won the hearts of millions of viewers with his genuine love of history and his ability to find the stories behind each artifact. Fritz's legacy will probably always be remembered as that of a dedicated picker who inspired others to find the beauty and value in old things. Even after he died, his fans will still remember his bright smile and excitement. Wolfe's murder conviction has ruined his reputation forever, even though he was an important part of the show's early success, creating an image of a smart businessman and a visionary in the antiques world. Wolfe's legacy will always be linked to betrayal, greed, and brutal violence. Mike Wolfe got a well-deserved life sentence for his crime. One thing is for sure, the The world of pickers and the American pickers was once a way to honor the past and celebrate America's unique cultural values. But now it's tainted by betrayal, murder, and the horrible outburst in court that showed a scary darkness hiding behind a charming exterior and a fake passion for old things. What do you think really happened? Are there any secrets still unlocked in this shocking case? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the station to make sure you don't miss any more stories or in-depth analyses.